we have become ignorant of our power of the purse as a people. We have been allowing the federal government to extort liberty from us, right? So they say, if we don't pass this continuing resolution, the federal government will shut down. And then the country freaks out, right? Because if the government shuts down, what happens? The states don't get federal funding, right? Mm-hmm. The states don't get federal funding. The people don't get their checks. That's extortion, my friend. That is saying, if you don't give us unlimited spending, we will not pay you. And that is a crime. Extortion is a crime.
A must-own gold stock, K92 Mining, trading on the TSX venture under KNT. Head of exploration is the man responsible for the largest gold discovery in history. Gold production will commence in the matter of weeks for this new company, headed up by an all-star management team. Their core project and mine was purchased by Barrick Gold at the height of the bull market in 2006 for $142 million. At the depths of the bear market, this management team swooped in and bought this project for $2 million last year. To learn more about this soon-to-be mid-tier gold producer with a cash cost estimated at a low $600 per ounce, visit crushthestreet.com/gold IPO.
Hello everyone, and welcome into crushthestreet.com. I am Kenneth Amaduri, and I'm joined today with a special guest, a constitutional expert, no one more grounded than KrisAnne Hall on this issue. She's an educator. She's, speaking constantly, hosts the very popular KrisAnne Hall show, and her website is KrisAnneHall.com. KrisAnne, thanks for joining me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for doing what you do, actually. It's very noble, and you are a complete expert when it comes to the government and the Constitution, and it's been too long, if you ask me, since we've done our last interview. And you know what? Let's get right into the election. We just had the debate here on Monday between Clinton and Trump, and I just want to get your initial reactions. I want to throw it out there. What are your initial reactions to what you saw on Monday night?
Well, I don't compare the candidates to each other. I compare them to the only real standard, which is the Constitution. And there were two very, very disturbing things that came up during this debate. The first was the assertion that stop and frisk, the practice of a warrantless search on your person just because you're standing on the street corner, is somehow necessary to protect people from criminals is very, very disturbing. The idea that our right to be secure from unreasonable searches and seizures is somehow mutable by the arbitrary determination of a single officer that you are somehow suspicious. The problem that comes up here is that we have this misrepresentation by government and by law that the term in the Fourth Amendment that talks about the fact that we are to be secure from unreasonable searches and seizures is subject to interpretation of reasonableness. That is not true. The reasonableness is not subject to interpretation because the Fourth Amendment itself establishes what is a reasonable search and seizure. Therefore, anything outside what the Fourth Amendment establishes as reasonable is now unreasonable. And so the Fourth Amendment establishes that the only reasonable search and seizure is one that has is issued by a warrant based upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, meaning it is subject to due process review, that it particularly describes the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. And the inclusion of our framers of that word "and" means that all 5 of these conditions must be present at the same time for a search to be reasonable. And stop and frisk is simply somebody standing on the street corner where an officer comes up and says, "Hi, I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes. Can we talk?" And then the person agreeing to talk to the officer now equates, legally speaking, as consent to the discussion. And once the consent to the discussion begins, the officer says, well, since we're going to be talking, I am going to simply pat you down for my safety. Both of these approaches by the officer can be legally refused. If you're just standing on the street corner and an officer says, can we talk, you can simply say to the officer, no, I don't have time, and move on, or simply, no, I don't want to talk to you. And if you do agree to talk and the officer says, well, I'm just going to pat you down for my safety, you have the right to say, no, you will not pat me down for your safety. You will not touch me without a warrant. But most Americans don't understand that they have the right to say no. And so they say yes. And upon that consent, now, the officer will not only pat you down for what he may perceive to be a weapon, but if he is to pat your pocket and feel something that he now, by arbitrary determination and opinion, determines to be a contraband item, the officer now, by this stop and frisk law, has the authority to go into your pockets or demand that you remove things from your pockets with the threat of arrest.
Wow.
Now, there is no warrant. There is no probable cause. The approach and the search is all based on the arbitrary terms of suspicion. There is no due process, no challenge other than refusal. And oftentimes the officers are not even aware that you have the right to refuse, so they take a refusal as a violation of law and they arrest you. And then there is no warrant to describe the particular place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. And so stop and frisk is completely a violation of your liberty, which should be a per se violation of the Constitution.
Wow. Yeah, no, that is amazing. And I've thought about that a lot. And I've known people who have, had some run-ins with the law. And, it's scary, though, for the average person to go down the rabbit hole of putting up a fight against the police, saying no, because you don't want to be in that position where an entity that, otherwise could take away your freedom. I mean, if you end up going to jail or things like that, accusing you of something, saying, hey, this happened to me, or this person did, now the officer's lying. And, you just don't want to be dealing with.
Point. Right, but that's the whole point. We are afraid because we are uninformed, because we are uneducated on both sides. We have fear because we do not understand that these are our rights, and we should not be afraid to exercise our rights. And we are afraid because the officers themselves are ignorant of our rights and somehow believe that their voice carries the weight of law. And so none of this is going to change as long as we establish the status quo. And it's certainly not going to change if we get people in the presidential office who believe that necessity outweighs liberty. The other thing that was very disturbing about our presidential election was the candidate's assertion of this principle of no fly, no gun. I know the common saying is no fly, no buy, meaning if you get on a no-fly list, you shouldn't be allowed to buy a gun. But I think that's an oversimplification, and people really need to understand the true ramification. It is not a no-fly, no-buy gun. It's a no-fly, no-gun, period. Because it won't be long before the government will not only justify, well, if you're on a no-fly list, you can't buy a gun. So then they'll justify, if you're on a no-fly list, you can't own a gun. Because what's the point of restricting you from buying a gun if you already have a cache of weapons in your home? And so it really is not no-fly, no-buy. It is no-fly, no-gun, which means now that this is really not about guns. This is something we need to understand. This is not about guns. This is about denial of due process. This is about the revocation of property and liberty without any recourse, based simply on an arbitrary determination by the government under secret terms that cannot be challenged. And this is extremely, extremely disturbing. And whether your candidate be Hillary Clinton or your candidate be Donald Trump, somebody who is understanding of the Constitution and liberty-minded had better get in touch with these people and correct them in their errant understanding. And here's the problem. If we cannot correct them while they're running for election, if we cannot correct them in their errors while they are begging for our approval, how are we ever going to correct them when they actually get into office and they think that they have our approval unconditionally?
Yeah, that's a great question right there. KrisAnne, I wanted to talk to you about this then. The Second Amendment, a lot of people talking about it, and a lot of concern as to the government taking our guns away. And you laid out some really interesting points there as to why. But I would also bring up, maybe a devil's advocate type comment, that back when the Constitution was written, it was a much different situation with the guns that they had back then, and the ability for the common man and a group of common men to actually resist the government. Now, would you really say that people owning guns can resist the government with the technology that they have and just the different world that we're in? And is that really the concern? Are they really concerned about an uprising of the people nowadays?
Well, I think that's always the concern of government. That's the whole basis for disarming the people. The Second Amendment was not established to remind us to be armed so we can protect ourselves from robbers and rapists, or so that we can go hunting. Our framers gave us instruction manuals on the meaning of the Constitution. They come in the form of the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist papers, the notes that Madison took during the debates, and the explanatory letters that they wrote to each other. These are the manual, the workers' manual on how to apply the Constitution. And they said over and over again that the purpose of our right to keep and bear arms is so that we can comply with the first law of nature, which is our right to self-preservation. And that government is the biggest threat to our own self-preservation.
Yeah.
And so the principle that our framers put in the right to keep and bear arms, which is why they didn't say musket, was so that the people would always be able to out-arm the government. And if the government didn't think that we could out-arm them, they wouldn't be so intent on trying to disrupt the arming of the people.
I love that point. That's why they didn't say musket and they actually said arms. So theoretically, the people should always have enough firepower, enough arms to match what the government has, because that is the point.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
right.
no.
In U.S. v. Miller in 1939, the Supreme Court agreed that if the military owns the firearm, then the people should have the right to own it too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, great point there. I love it. Let's move on into the government budget, KrisAnne. We have a situation here where the government is running out of funds and the budget is ending here, and they want to continue this resolution. And as you've pointed out, this is unconstitutional. And so let's get right into this. Do you think we're going to be over the $20 trillion mark in debt by the end of the year?
We're already over the $20 trillion mark. The $20 trillion mark, or the $18 trillion mark, or whatever they're talking about today, is just simply smoke and mirrors, because the government has what they call mandatory funding, and they have funding that is hidden under certain titles and shields. And top economists are telling us that right now the deficit is really more like $200 trillion when you take into account all of the budgeting that that Congress does not account for in their official budget. It's sort of like the way they report unemployment numbers, right? So everybody knows that the unemployment rate is catastrophically different than what they report. But it's the way that they report. It's somebody said, statistics never lie, but liars use statistics, because you can always get the number that you want if you ask the right questions. And that's what's happening. And the way that they're running this government without actually a budget, in moving from continuing resolution to continuing resolution, is not only unconstitutional, but it's absolutely destructive to the liberty of the people and the way our Constitution was established to control, as James Madison said, the overgrown prerogatives of the branches of government. This budgeting system that was designed for our Constitution was so that the power of the purse rests in the hands of the House alone, so that the power of the people over their immediate representatives would control the size and function of government through the power of the purse. Madison explained in 1789 during the ratification debate that the Constitution had made the distinction that the House was alone to control the purse because the House was chosen by the people and supposed to be best acquainted with their interests and abilities, recognizing that the power of the purse, as Madison said, is the most complete and effectual weapon with which any constitution can arm the immediate representatives of the people for obtaining a redress of every grievance and carrying into effect every just and salutary measure. So we have a House that is denying their delegated authority, shirking their responsibilities, and avoiding accountability through created procedures and constitutional destruction. And here we are now careening into debt, funding things that are unconstitutional, and funding things that should not even be supported by the people.
So with that and the election coming up, what do you suppose will happen with this resolution, and how will it play out? Is it better for the Democrats, better for the Republicans? I know you don't get too much into that, but I mean, what do you see playing out with this resolution, unconstitutional resolution?
Well, the resolutions is how we've had a budget for decades now. We don't even operate on a constitutional budget anymore. We move from continuing resolution to continuing resolution. And the sad thing is that it supports government as a whole. So both the Republicans and the Democrats are in support of this continuing resolution fiasco because it creates power and shields accountability. So here's what happens. You have these threats, the looming government shutdown and all this other crazy stuff. First and foremost, the president doesn't have the authority via the Constitution to shut down the government or even to oppose a budget. The budget is controlled by the House alone under Article 1, Section 7, Clause 1. That's it, the House alone. The Senate doesn't even have the authority to filibuster a budget or stop a budget from passing. The Constitution says the Senate may offer amendments, but they cannot object. And if the House doesn't like their amendments, the House doesn't have to take their amendments. Our framers were very, very serious and very definitive when they said the House of Representatives alone refuses and proposes the supplies requisite for the support of the government. And so the continuing resolution supports all political parties in power. And both political parties are in power. Make sure that we understand that. We have a majority of Republicans in the House and the Senate, and we have a Democrat president, and we have a liberal Supreme Court. So both parties are in power at any given time, which means power is not going to be relinquished by either party because nobody wants to give up power that they've already had. And the power of the purse resting in the hands of the people is the ultimate check and balance. It's amazing because Jefferson said the most amazing thing. Let me see if I can find this quote for you very quickly. Jefferson said in 1775 in a response to a reconciliatory plan that Lord North had offered, he said, "The privilege of giving or withholding our monies is an important barrier against the undue exertion of prerogative, which, if left altogether without control, may be exercised to our great oppression. And all of history shows how efficacious is its intercession for redress of grievances and reestablishment of rights, and how improvident it would be to part with so powerful a mediator. The power of the purse resting in the hands of the people is the only way we control government, and it's the only way we peacefully control government. It's the only way we peacefully restore our rights and prevent oppression. However, because we have become ignorant of our power of the purse as a people, we have been allowing the federal government to extort liberty from us, right? So they say, if we don't pass this continuing resolution, the federal government will shut down. And then the country freaks out, right? Because if the government shuts down, what happens? The states don't get federal funding, right? Mm-hmm. The states don't get federal funding. The people don't get their checks. That's extortion, my friend. That is saying, if you don't give us unlimited spending, we will not pay you. And that is a crime. Extortion is a crime. Making people fear so that they will pay money. And that's why we're in the situation that we're in.
Those are powerful words right there, KrisAnne. And, there's not many people out there articulating it the way you have and putting it so plainly the way you have. And again, that's, very powerful. And I'm so glad you came on the show to share with us your thoughts on these constitutional issues that we are facing. So with that, is there any final words of advice that you would have for our audience here? And please also share with them how they can reach out to you or learn about more of what you do.
Well, I would just simply hope that what the people heard today were not my thoughts and were not my opinions. What I try to do always is to not offer up opinions or interpretations, but to offer up history and facts. It is, in fact, that Jefferson said these things. It is, in fact, that Madison said these things. It is, in fact, the reason why they put the power of the purse in the hands of the House alone. These are facts. These are historical facts. And until we understand that these are not interpretations up for debate, that these are actual historical facts, we're not going to be able to restore things because we lack the power and the standing of that foundation to assert without compromise. And so if people would like to know more about this taxation issue and other issues, they should go to KrisAnneHall.com, KrisAnnehall.com. I have articles and radio shows. Follow me on Facebook. We're talking about this stuff every day on Facebook in a short and concise way that you can share and educate your friends. And this is what it's about. It's the power of education. So we can educate to liberate from this federal oppression.
Educate to liberate for this federal oppression. I love it. All right, everyone. Definitely check out KrisAnne Hall. Follow her on Facebook. And we'll see everyone next time. KrisAnne Hall, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Absolutely.